But why a burden, even if it is called light? Moreover, if anyone refuses to understand that forgiveness is nevertheless also a burden which is to be borne, even if an easy burden, then he takes the forgiveness in vain. The forgiveness is not deserved, it is not so heavy, but neither is it to be taken in vain, for neither is it so light. Forgiveness is not to be repaid, it is not so costly, it cannot be repaid, but neither is it to be regarded as nothing, it is too dearly bought for that. Lo, here it is again true of meekness in order to believe, in order to bear the light burden of forgiveness, in order to bear the joy of forgiveness. It may be difficult for flesh and blood to bear the light burden, but if this light burden becomes heavy to bear, then there is a rebellious mind which refuses to believe. On the other hand, if this light burden becomes so light that it cannot be called a burden at all, then has thoughtlessness taken it in vain. Forgiveness, reconciliation with God, is a light burden to bear, and yet it is precisely like the light burden of meekness, for it is for flesh and blood the heaviest, even heavier than the consciousness of sin, for it is offense. As therefore the Christian is always recognizable through meekness, so also the essential Christianly is precisely such that it can only be believed in meekness. Every exaggeration of melancholy or thoughtlessness is at once a sign that faith is not really present. For Christ did not come into the world in order to make life easy in the sense of thoughtlessness, nor to make it hard in the sense of despondency, but in order to lay the light burden on the believer. The thoughtless man is willing to let everything be forgotten. He believes in vain. The melancholy man is not willing to let anything be forgotten. He believes in vain. But the one who believes, he believes that everything is forgotten, yet in such a way that he bears a light burden, for does he not bear the memory of having been forgiven? The thoughtless are even willing to let this memory be forgotten. That is, everything is forgiven and forgotten. But faith says, everything is forgotten. Remember that it is forgiven. We can indeed forget in many ways. We can forget because we have other things to think of. We can forget thoughtlessly and light-mindedly. We can believe everything forgotten because we ourselves have forgotten. But the eternal justice can and will forget in only one way, through forgiveness. But then the believer must not forget. He must, on the contrary, constantly be reminded that he has been forgiven. The melancholy man will not forget. He will not remember that he is forgiven. He will remember the guilt. Therefore he cannot believe. But from the forgiveness a new life will issue in the believer. Consequently, the forgiveness can never be forgotten. It is no longer only the law which is the schoolmaster to bring us to Christ, but forgiveness through Christ is the gentle schoolmaster who does not have the heart to recall the forgotten, but does recall it sufficiently to say, "Remember, however, that it is forgiven. It is not forgotten, but it is forgotten in the forgiveness. Every time you remember the forgiveness, then it is forgotten. But when you forget the forgiveness, then it is not forgotten, and then the forgiveness is forfeited." Is not this, however, a light burden? If you know, my hearer, how to explain it in any other way, then explain it to me. I do not know anything else than this simplicity of faith, which still relates itself to a difficult saying, for it is indeed always a difficult saying which puts together such different words as light and burden. It is a difficult saying, oh, but a human life indeed also has difficulties. But the difficult saying is for the Christian to understand, and the difficulty of life is for the Christian to bear, moreover to bear it lightly. For to him the yoke is easy and the burden is light.